Welcome to Voices About Living, a podcast hosted by therapist Valerie Hamaker, who talks with the brave voices of various individuals who have worked with her as their psychotherapist. These voices share their personal experiences of growth and transformation.
Hey, welcome to Voices About Living. This is your host, Valerie Hamaker, and I'm so grateful to have you here. And I'm really excited to kick off a new series on all things parenting. As I frequently do, I'm going to be having a previous client of mine on the show with me, a young mother by the name of Becca, and we are going to be having a conversation about the work that I did with her around postpartum depression recovery and all things young mothering and the pitfalls and the struggles and the joys and the pains of being a young mother in this world today. So I think you're going to really enjoy that. And then following that interview for the next few weeks, I am going to run a couple of shows that I was on as the guest expert around the issue of parenting, attachment, perfectionism, and shame resilience. So stay with me for the next several weeks, and you are going to get all sorts of great information about all things parenting. One final thing I wanted to ask of you is if you're enjoying this content, I would just love it if you would pause and rate and write a review of this show. Please feel free to share this with those in your circles and also hit that subscribe button and you will get reminders every week as my show comes out. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Please join me as I talk to a really close friend of mine who I had the privilege of working with as a therapist named Becca. How are you doing today, Becca?
Good.
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 Well, happy to have you here. I think what we'll do is maybe why don't we start, Becca, with just your sharing with us what brought you into my office.
So, I came in, I had talked to my physician about weaning off of my Prozac, my antidepressant medication, because I had been on it a year and it was about time, and I was also looking to get pregnant, have another baby, and Prozac is not recommended for pregnancy in the third trimester, but she said if I was to wean off my medication, I needed to do counseling as well. She strongly recommended counseling, so that is what initially brought me into counseling.
Awesome. So when I met Becca, she shared with me from the very beginning that she had suffered from some pretty severe postpartum depression following the birth of her first child. And what you might actually hear a little bit in the background is we've got second baby laying on the floor next to us, and so happy that things have gone really well in her life.
Yeah.
with another baby. But she's a young mom. Husband is very, very busy in medical school, and they're very active in their Christian church. And this postpartum depression had been pretty overwhelming to her. And on the fantastic recommendation of her doctor, they wanted to get her in a position to where she was more stabilized and making a little bit of sense of what had happened through her first postpartum period, so that she could be situated and just as well resourced as possible following the hopeful pregnancy and delivery of a second baby. That sound about right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just talk about a little bit about what your impression was as we started meeting with each other.
So we came in, or I had never done counseling before, and I came in thinking that we would just talk about our feelings. You would give me some good tools to help me choose happiness and choose to be productive, and that was my initial expectation. Okay. We started talking just about how I wanted to wean off of my medication and that I was nervous because depression and postpartum depression are common in my family. I was nervous that would be a life sentence. But we talked about postpartum depression, and I thought, what makes Valerie qualified? I know she has her degree in counseling, but why should I be sharing these sacred fears
Yeah.
with her?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I went home the first session, and I thought on it for a little while, and then the next session, we worked with a sandbox. Do you
Sand tray?
Sand tray?
Yeah. So I love what you just said there, Rebecca. And it's really what she's articulating in some ways is very common to someone's experience in coming into counseling, especially for the first time, which is this ambivalence that, like, why would I go to someone who I've never known before and somehow share with them some of my deepest, darkest fears and feelings and experiences and expect them to somehow, how does that work to where I can become okay when sharing with a stranger? And I personally think that's an incredibly fair question. Like, I really do. And I love that from the very beginning, Becca was open with me, and yet at the same time, I could tell she was checking me out. She was trying to decide if she could trust me. And I think that to me showed a lot of maturity and wisdom, which incidentally, throughout my time working with Becca for a very young mom, has an enormous amount of insight and wisdom and maturity. And so yeah, we started by, I just wanted to learn more about her. I wanted to learn about the postpartum depression. I wanted to learn what it felt like. I wanted to just show her my my curiosity about her experience, and more than anything, I wanted to have a better understanding of the fear that she was experiencing. And the way that healing works is that the brain is able to heal when it detects love and safety. And luckily for me in this situation, Rebecca is an incredibly easy person to love. She was just so warm and willing to look at herself and willing to talk, even though she was watching me. But she wanted to feel better. She wanted to have an understanding, and she gave me the chance. And so, to kind of move back to the question Rebecca's comment about the sand tray, is I wanted to see if she could share with me what her experience was through a different kind of therapy, which is what sand tray is. And so sand tray is basically, I sit her up at a table and I sit next to her, and I have several hundred strategically purchased figurines that help someone describe through, like, a non-verbal way, an experience or something that is important about their life. And the philosophy behind this is that sometimes when we go through an experience that is very profound and very high in emotion, sometimes words can't quite do the job in articulating what we felt and what we went through. And so giving her the opportunity to sit in front of this tray full of kinetic sand, and then offering her the chance to sort of create her experience using these figurines. There are a variety of sort of friendly people and mean people, people of all ages, nature, trees, some symbolic things like caskets and money, and all sorts of things like that, plus all sorts of animals that can be used symbolically just according to how each person interprets them. And so I set Rebecca in front of the sand tray, and I sat next to her to offer her sort of my moral support. And she created a sand tray that articulated her experience with postpartum depression. And I'm going to just let you sort of talk about what that was like for you, because I know that was a turning point for you.
So it was a pretty raw experience, just creating something I had felt so intensely for someone else to see and for myself to see. Yeah, I hadn't addressed my postpartum depression. I had kind of just been trying to ignore it and trying to forget about it, move forward, just let it be something that happened and move on. And so it was kind of building up, I think, more fears that way.
Yeah.
But I created this scene and I explained it to you of my experience with postpartum depression, that it was scary and my husband was trying to be helpful.
Can you share with us who you chose to represent your husband? I thought this was really cute.
Yeah, I had Woody from Toy Story and
Like a
knight in armor
yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to be a knight in armor guy, but his intentions weren't really working out because it was something completely new to him. With postpartum depression, it hit it pretty rapidly. I was sobbing uncontrollably that first week of my little girl's life, and I thought, this is how my life is going to be forever.
Like, this is it. Yeah.
And so Jameson, my husband, was overwhelmed, like, how am I supposed to help this sobbing woman?
Yeah.
And he was full of good intentions. I called him like the good intention man, and then the Woody was his real self, that he was kind of hiding behind the good intentions. But so I explained just how there was a forest and snakes coming out of the forest, and
yeah, I remember that.
Like postpartum, it's gonna get you.
Yeah, like the hiding of the snakes.
Yeah,
like the fear that it was there and it was dangerous.
Yeah, I was there. I didn't know when they'd get me. Maybe they would come back, and I had chosen my favorite Disney princess for myself, Belle.
Yeah.
And she was lying on the ground and helpless. But I explained the scene to Valerie, and actually, when she had me, after I created the scene, explain it to her.
Yeah.
And that's when I made the choice, like, who is Valerie?
Yes.
For me to be sharing this with her. And I made the realization, I know that one of the gifts God gave me is to love people.
Yeah.
Who's to say that he can't give other people that gift too?
Aww.
And so
sweet.
I realized that Valerie was blessed with the gift of loving me, and this was an important time for me to allow her to use that gift. So then I opened up and I told her about it, and it was tearful and wonderful being able to finally process and get those fears and stresses off my chest. And then at the end of the scene, since we had talked about it, we put the good intention man to the side. I did. And Woody and Belle stood up and looked at the forest full of snakes and a little Satan man.
I love it. I remember that. Yeah.
They were able to face it head on together. And it was just special and tender for me to process that. And you explained the left brain, right brain experience.
Yeah.
I was finally able to process it and file it away and not be afraid of postpartum depression anymore.
I love that. I love your explanation, Rebecca. And let me tell you some of the things that especially resonate with me in your sharing of the story again that we experienced. One of the first things that I remember very significantly was your making a choice to let me in. And I remember you even saying, Valerie, I am choosing to let you love me. And I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to let you in. And you said those words explicitly, and it brings up an important point that no matter what the capacity or intentions of one person is, the other has to be able to receive that and let that happen, like absorb it.
Definitely.
And you did. And I think it was in part because of some of your capacity to love, and that that part of what God has given you is the capacity to love. And so you gave me the privilege of letting me be a part of your story. And so I really remember that. And something else that really struck me when we were working through this sound tray together was Becca mentioned in her explanation that her way of coping with postpartum depression, and this is pretty typical, is that when it started to sort of gradually lift a little bit and she felt some relief from it, her strategy was to pretend like it never happened and sort of deny its existence, because by acknowledging its existence, in some ways there's a fear that we're giving it power and it's going to come back. Does that feel fair to you?
Yes.
And so the problem with that is that when we do that, what we're actually doing is we in some ways are actually giving it quite a bit of power, because we end up navigating our lives around the fear that it's going to come back. So we end up sort of moving about the world with sort of a low-grade sense of fear that anything, or that things can bring up the memory of the postpartum depression and somehow give it power. And so what I was expressing to Rebecca, which I think was what was kind of frightening to her, was something completely different, which is this idea that we're going to do something completely different. We're actually going to look at postpartum depression and we are going to establish a relationship with it. We are going to learn who she is, and we're going to talk to her, and we're going to have her be far enough away from us that we can look at her for what she is. And by doing that, we are actually taking the power away from that entity that is so frightening. And that's part of the reason why I chose to the sand tray, because I believe in my recollection, as we worked together at first, it was so overwhelming and frightening for her to talk about, that when I sense with a client that something is becoming sort of outside of their capacity to tolerate it and describe it, but yet I feel like it's an important thing to look at. And I do feel like that they have the resourcing and the capacity to look at it perhaps from a different perspective. I will take them over to the sand tray, because oftentimes those really, really important experiences can become narrative if we have a little bit of distance from them. And so by taking her to the sand tray, the experience of depression was not something embedded in her psyche. It was something that she could use the figurines to explain, and then with me by her side, she could look at it as an almost like an outside observer. And I love what you said at the end, which is when Belle and Woody were able to sort of like metaphorically hand in hand be standing there staring at the forest and the snakes. It was a moment where we together, you shared with me your understanding that I get what happened, and I can tolerate this thing because I understand it a little bit better, and I have my partner, and we together, we're going to be okay. And it's not something that's so frightening that it can't be named, that we've now named it. And by naming it, in essence, we begin to tame it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound good?
Yes, it does.
So yeah, that was that was a beautiful moment for us, I believe. And so I loved it.
It was the gateway, I think, to our experiences after that.
Yeah.
To me feeling comfortable sharing other things.
Yes, and it's pretty neat that most of the time when people come in, they sort of have their presenting thing, the thing that becomes, that's the big deal, that's really weighing heavily on them. But the beautiful thing about therapy is that as our relationship becomes deeper and stronger, the brain opens up, and it has this increased appetite to grow more and more and more, because it's found safety and it's found refuge. And so what you said is really true, that you came in for that, and we worked through that rather early on in our time together, and then we moved on to some other pretty significant things. So why don't you just maybe share some of the other like more important moments in our experiences together?
So my theory was, if I'm doing therapy, I want to make it worth it.
Yeah.
So I came each week with something
that
I wanted to address.
Which made her a delightful client, because she was always hungry and ready and had a journal in hand and a list. So it was awesome.
I think one of the big themes was self-doubt or dislike, not seeing or valuing my worth.
Yeah.
And also, well, because as a young mom, it's hard to remember to take care of yourself. So it was significant when you shared the big five things. You explained that if somebody did all 5 of these things, I don't think that they would need therapy or something like
They're,
that.
like, it would like maximize their mental health.
Yes.
Yeah. Want me to share with you? Do you
Yeah.
want to remember?
Oh, well, they are.
Okay, go for it.
Exercise, healthy eating, just
Yep.
sleep, healthy connection with others, and meditation.
Correct. Those are, I don't take any credit for those. I learned those from Dr. Dan Siegel. So.
Yeah. So, those things, I started to try and take care of myself by meditating. We took a minute. I'd never meditated before, and we sat down and how do you explain to somebody how to meditate?
Yeah, so good question. And I actually walk most of the people that I work with through meditation because I am a huge believer in the power of meditation. Not only it's been empirically validated pretty much all over the place. And for the first little while, as I would read it and I would see it all over the place, I believed it, but I had never really experienced it. So I felt a little bit uncomfortable like being a proponent of it until I really started doing my own studies on it. And it turns out that there are a couple of things, there's a multitude of things that meditation actually helps, but one of the things that it helps is it cultivates the part of the brain that helps us have an observing self function, meaning that when we meditate, we are strengthening the muscle of the brain. We're teaching the brain how to be still. And so it's kind of the opposite when we are trying to strengthen the muscles in the body. We contract them and we move them. When we're trying to strengthen the brain, we teach it how to be still, because the brain, in its sort of when it's not disciplined, it runs and runs and runs and runs. And so if we listen to the functions of the brain, or we listen to the way the brain is talking all of the time, then we are often very vulnerable to depression, anxiety, all sorts of like overwhelm. And when we learn to still the brain, we start noticing from this observing self-function that what we are thinking is the product of a machine that just keeps running, and it doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with truth or reality. And so for somebody who has struggled with depression, the brain is an organ that sometimes is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy around issues that sort of sorrow and hopelessness and things like that. So if we learn how to teach the brain that it is not our master, but that we are its master. In other words, if we cultivate what I would call the true brain over the false brain, then we become capable of overcoming addictions, trauma, depression, anxiety. Pretty much everything that people come into therapy for can be helped by learning how to meditate. So I talked Becca through a short meditation, which is just breathing, slowing oneself down, closing the eyes. There's a lot of different ways to do it. The way I teach my clients to do it is I teach them to still their minds and breathe in through the nose while counting to 4, and breathe out through the mouth while counting to 6, to pay close attention to the breath, and that every time a thought comes in, to just, with compassion, imagine it on a cloud, floating by, and then let the mind become still again. And every time a thought enters in again, just allow it to come in and compassionately let it go. And that one is successful at meditation not when one has an empty mind for the entire time, but rather when one continuously notices the thought and lets it go. The noticing of the thought is the true mind noticing the workings of the false mind. And so, a little bit of a tangent there, but that's kind of the meditation spiel. And I might do a whole other section on that somewhere else.
So I think we set the timer and tried to meditate for 5 minutes. I remember, the way I remember it is I just tried to keep my mind blank for 5 minutes and like continue to breathe, keep my eyes closed and relax, and thank the thoughts for coming and say, but you can go now. And for 5 minutes I was still. And I think my daughter was maybe 16, 17, 18 months at the time, and I hadn't been still in I don't know how long.
Months and months, probably, right?
Yeah, and so taking a minute to be still, to just be with myself, excusing thoughts and letting my mind be clear, opened up the possibility and opportunity to feel peace. And I had actually been praying and asking God to help me to feel His love and know where I stand in His presence. And one of the thoughts that my prayers are never answered in the ways I think that they might be, but I felt peace for the first time in months, and that was my answer to prayer, because God knew it was the one thing I needed, and through meditating I felt peace for the first time. So that was a big moment in our therapy together.
I did not know that, Becca.
Yeah.
I missed that in the moment. So I really appreciate your sharing that with me. And I think what you say is so important, that like our capacity to hear God and commune with God in many ways has to do with our stilling our minds. And so meditating is a way not only to find sort of with regards to the struggles in our own lives, but it opens up a conduit so that God can enter in. Because sometimes I wonder if He can't enter in, not because He's not there, but because there's just no brain space for Him to hear Him.
No stillness.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. That's awesome.
So you had asked about other
big moments that we shared together.
My daughter, like I mentioned, she was young at the time. She still is. She's 2.5 years old now. I felt the need to try potty training her at 18 months old, and a lot of mothers can do it. Good for you guys, and I think you're wonderful. But it was in the Becca rule book that's what I needed to do too. And so my husband, he's in medical school right now, and he was studying for board exams, leaving at 6 in the morning and getting home at 9 or 10 p.m. at night, and it was just me and my little girl. I had found out I was pregnant with our second baby, and I wanted her to be potty trained before our next baby came, one baby in diapers at a time. But in reality, what I had done was I closed myself in my house with an energetic toddler, and made it so, like, you can't leave the house when your child is potty training. At least that's what I told myself, because they'll pee or poop on the floor. You can't leave them with sitters, because you can't count on other people to continue potty training your child. So in a time where I was lonely, I made it so I couldn't go out for connection.
Yeah.
But I had an appointment with Valerie, and lo and behold, I brought Ruby, my little girl, because she was potty training, and I didn't want to have her poop on somebody else's floor. And then she pooped on Valerie's floor. And I was stressing out, like, I'm trying my best to potty train this child. I want her to, like, I'm only supposed to have one child in diapers at a time. My husband really wants me to potty train, and I want to show him that I'm a mom that has it together. And I guess I want to show other people that too. And I want to believe myself that I'm a mother who has this together. And we had a conversation about why.
Yeah. So let me jump in and just share with you my experience. The good news is about this situation. So I myself am a mother of 4 children. My youngest is almost 12 years old. So I'm like a couple chapters ahead of Becca. But I was watching her having these experiences and having like the strongest deja vu moments with just so much like. It was like love and compassion, and then there was just a part of me that was just, the compassion really had a lot to do with my seeing in her parts of myself that I struggled with too. And so I work out of a home office, and so I let her take her little one in, and actually it was enough of a situation that she needed to take a bath. And so luckily, since it's a home office, I just, she took off. She just went ahead to the next room and bathed her little baby. And all the while I was thinking about, how do I handle this situation? There was just a tiny little like non-therapeutic part of me that wanted to say, honey, Becca, what are you doing? Like, why are you putting yourself through this? Because her baby was so little, and she's a young pregnant mom, and she's trying so hard to do what's right. And so I resisted the urge to sort of jump in and sort of correct her. And I decided to use this as a moment of growth and of learning, and to sort of help Rebecca discover herself what was driving this intense need to sort of use this potty training situation to develop a sense of self.
Well, and at the time, Valerie was asking me, like, who are you trying to prove your enoughness to? To yourself, to somebody else? And I was like, no, I'm not trying. I was in total denial. I'm not trying to prove to anybody. It's just Ruby is interested in the potty, and it's time to potty train. And really, how much better would life be if I didn't have two children in diapers? And I was really against the idea that I was trying to prove anything to anybody.
Yeah. And so I remember noticing her struggle, and noticing that, like, there was something really important about her potty training her daughter. And so important that I could tell it was, I always know there's something kind of going on in the background of when something's being driven in a way that makes somebody sort of not open to discussion or possibilities about something deeper needing to be discovered. When there's a lot of, and I wouldn't even say Rebecca she wasn't resistant per se, but she kept insisting that, like, this was the right thing, and this was good, and this was okay. And so the way I managed that was, of course, just trying to be really compassionate, because, of course, I don't live inside of Rebecca's brain, but I could tell that and I'm trying to say this gently, but I could tell that her little gal was instrumental in helping Becca feel like she was a good mom. In other words, I'm really trying to veer away from the word, like, that she was using her daughter, because that's not what I mean, but I was kind of, her daughter was the means by which Becca was trying to prove something to herself and to her husband and kind of to the world. Because as we discussed it when she brought the little gal back in, I said to her, tell me what would happen. Like, what would that be like if you just, what would happen if it didn't work out? What if Ruby resists too much, or, or even what if you stop trying,
So, we talked about it, and I realized that she would go back into diapers. I thought, well, maybe she'll regress so much that she'll never be potty trained again. And Valerie said, well, I don't know any kids that are in kindergarten that aren't potty trained, or at least by 12 years old.
That's right. So I kind of made a joke of it a little bit.
And I realized that, I don't know, like, in hindsight, it's harder to explain, but I was using this sweet 1.5-year-old. I wanted to show I wanted to show my husband, since he wasn't home, something tangible, something he could really see that was a success on my part. I wanted to feel that I was wonderful for him, wonderful for myself, and I realized I have some things I need to talk to my husband about.
Right.
And I went home and I talked to him, and I said, look, I'm trying to potty train Ruby because I want you to know that I'm an awesome mom, an awesome mother to our children.
Wow.
And that kind of took him by surprise, and he explained that there's nothing I could or couldn't do that would make him think I wasn't a good mom or a good just person.
Wow.
And it opened up a conversation that we are a team, and Ruby didn't need that stress on her at such a young age, and I needed the human connection with others. Like, getting out of the house was more important than Ruby going to the bathroom and a toilet, and Ruby needed the freedom to be just a little girl, without worrying about pleasing me in that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's so profound. I love that you went home and shared with your husband that there were some almost like unintentional motives behind what you were doing. And it was because you were in some ways trying to prove to yourself and to him that there was something tangible that made you sort of a worthy person, worthy wife. And I think that's interesting because what he was doing in this stage of life seemed like there were more tangible markers of his success. He could go and take a test, or he could go and do something in his career development. And as young moms, and I spent, all of my children, I was home with all of them until they went to school, and it isn't easy to feel a lot of there's just not very many tangible markers of our enoughness. And so I think sometimes as mothers, we start to sort of fabricate ways to prove to the world that that we're viable. And sometimes we inadvertently, use our children to help us feel like we're enough. I remember personally, my daughters, the way they dressed and their hair was always just like impeccable. And sure, I liked them looking cute like most moms do, but there was something driving that was far more significant than just cute girls. I wanted the world to see two little girls that were 110% put together, because that's who their mom was.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
As I'm hearing myself say that, I'm like, oh my goodness,
well,
I did that.
You had shared that with me,
Yeah.
And it helped me see that I mean, who doesn't want their kids to, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I realized I was trying to keep Ruby's hair done also, and I thought, I'll do her hair to keep it out of her eyes.
Yeah.
And I'll sit her down and give her one of her favorite snacks and maybe let her watch a show, or she loves brushing her teeth, so she'll dip her toothbrush in water while I do her hair.
I love it.
But I told myself I'm only going to do her hair once a day.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how it turns out after naps or as she plays, I'm going to do her hair once a day and not worry. I didn't want to put it on her that she had to have perfect hair because I was a mom who had it together.
Oh my gosh, I love that you figured that out. I'm only figuring it out after my daughters are like almost grown.
Yeah, so
like, what's driving those things? I think it's just like for us to learn how to be curious about not what exactly that we're doing, but the energy and the hidden, and sometimes really like they're pretty innocent in nature. It's not, we're not being bad moms. We're trying to work our own stuff out, and we use, we're resourceful. We use the things that are around us to kind of help us figure ourselves out. So to be curious about that so that we aren't, inadvertently getting in the way of the development of our children because we're trying to develop ourselves with them almost as sort of the means of our development. Yeah.
So, with this pooping on the floor or potty training and hair doing session, I'm not sure if it was at this time, but you shared with me that your job is to kind of be eyes. Sometimes if I was unable to see my own self-worth, because I also had shared this with Valerie, I then shared how I often feel like or felt like I was inherently just not good. And I knew I was good in God's eyes, but what did I really have to contribute to people around me, my family, my friends? I just thought I was another body that was hanging around, and Valerie explained that this potty training triggered a lot of these thoughts and feelings I had had. But she shared if I wasn't able to at that time share or see my self-worth, part of Valerie's job was, well, she asked if I was to be Valerie, what would Valerie tell me about who I was? And so I imagined I was Valerie, and I don't remember everything I said, but I knew Valerie saw me as a wonderful woman, a caring mother, as someone who was exploring and trying to figure out life and how to be kind and loving to others. And me putting myself in Valerie's shoes to see myself helped me then have something to hold on to while I worked on feeling that way in my own heart.
I'm so glad you shared that, because, man, as we're even just talking about this, I'm getting like teary-eyed because I'm remembering those really like it was just really like sacred moments that we shared, because I feel like, I think we all go there sometimes with ourselves. We start doubting our worth and our worthiness. And sometimes what we need is just somebody who we know loves us, who we can remember how they see us. And it's almost like a little bit of it's a challenging practice, what I had you do, to say, I think you know how I feel about you. And so to have Becca like articulate in like out loud words, you see me as special, as a good mom, as a good woman, as trustworthy, as kind. And for me to agree and even say, and not only that, I see you as these other three things. And so to say to her, because part of the healing that happens through therapy and through really good, healthy relationships in general is that we take these moments and these experiences that we share with one another when we're like lucky enough to be in one another's presence. And the way the mind works is it can embed those feelings, that felt sense of security and love and enoughness. And we get to actually bring that with us when we go home. So that although, I only was lucky enough to see her, I think it was maybe every week and then every other week, and then it kind of tapered down from there, that I would even say to her, take me with you. Like, and when you're having a bad day and you forget, I want you to know that the way I feel about you never changes. And I see you as worthy, beautiful, hardworking, kind, loving, special, enough. And that she could take that with her as she continues on her journey to sort of believing it herself. And, this, we all need this, every last one of us. And it's kind of nice when we know that we need it. So sometimes when we have a bad day, we can even ask for it.
Oh, yeah. And then you then shared with me, be kind to yourself, especially as I'm in the trenches of young motherhood.
Yeah.
Be kind to myself and enjoy my time with Ruby. Remember to take care of me and allow Ruby to, you probably didn't say these things.
Yeah, that's what you picked up on. Yeah, it's even better.
Allow Ruby to be her own little 1-year-old and love and be kind to myself. And that was really important in these stressful days.
Yeah. Just to add to that, one of the things that I remember you and I really going through quite a bit, Becca, is something that's sort of sometimes I think embedded in our like culture of self-sufficiency and like successful people can kind of do it themselves sort of thing is Becca really had a hard time having needs and asking for help.
Yes. So like I said earlier, I was pregnant and I started bleeding. I had a hemorrhage that was causing a lot of bleeding internally around my uterus.
It was kind of early in the pregnancy. Yeah. It was pretty scary, I remember.
Early in the pregnancy spotting, and it wasn't normal implantation spotting. It was heavier and rich, fresh blood that implicated I was currently bleeding. And I would also wake up to puddles of blood.
Oh my gosh.
In
so
the bed.
Scary, yeah.
And I went to the doctors. I had placenta previa. It did resolve eventually, but in that time I had to really take it easy so that the hemorrhage would heal.
Yeah.
And so that I could continue to have a healthy pregnancy. And with taking it easy, I needed to ask for help. I couldn't keep up with my house the way I needed to. I needed to take naps when my days didn't always line up with my toddlers. So I came to Valerie really overwhelmed, and she helped me see that asking for help was a rich way to include others in my life and to allow them the connection with me that we both needed.
Well, it's almost like what we kept kind of exploring as Becca would come in with these struggles is I was really interested to understand the meaning that she was making of her choices. So when I would talk to her about like how you're chuckling, you're having some memories.
Yeah, I am a meaning making machine, and that's something my dad told me when I was younger. It's
so true. No, it
Yeah.
actually really applies, because when she was so incredibly kind of ambivalent or resistant to asking for help from people, I just wanted to spend time exploring that about her, because it seemed to me that it was speaking to something deep inside of her about what the meaning of having needs is, and what does that mean about you, that you make a phone call and ask somebody to help with your children or help with your home. And tell me what it is that you kind of learned, or what we learned together in our relationship through this discussion, or these discussions.
So I felt like asking for help would mean that. So a theme that you guys will hear is that I want to be a person that has it together, whatever it is. So if I call and ask for help, I don't have it together. And that is bad, or so I thought.
No, just that so
Yeah.
where does that come from? There's probably something that goes deeper in this sort of the way that your brain metabolizes, or has metabolized, the need for help equals what? Bad, what else? Or why? Either one.
Bad, and also helpless, or
Mm-hmm.
that I think it's really important to be able to help other people.
Yeah,
And so
huge one. Yeah.
if I'm asking for help, maybe I won't really be able to help others.
Yeah.
And it's just a really unhealthy way of looking at things, and it is really limiting to the relationships you can have with others.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of an all or nothing person when it came to housework. I was either going to do it all or not do it at all, and I was really rigid in my approach to housework. I needed to clean the entire house top to bottom and keep it completely spotless, or just live in a big old mess, with laundry piling up, clean laundry, but just keeping it piling on the couch, and the dishes, like, just keep them from being smelly, but always there.
Right.
So I realized I was afraid to ask. I had these ideas that my responsibility was to take care of my child and my home, and my husband was working really diligently in school, and so I was afraid to ask him for help. But Valerie challenged me to ask for help. When I was bleeding, she encouraged me to reach out to those in my community, my church community, for help. And I did. I talked to my husband, and one thing I've learned in therapy is anything I talk with Valerie about that I haven't spoken with my husband about, it's just good for our relationship if I go then, because he and I have decided we're best friends and we want to be there for each other through everything. So I went home and I talked to him and I said, look, I need help. I need your help, and I need others to be there also, because I'm afraid. I've been bleeding and I want this to get better. And he didn't know. He didn't know that if you don't ask, a lot of times people have no idea. So he was really wonderful at being helpful. But then my church community, I called and I asked for help, and then people were able to, and it was humbling because I could walk around, I didn't look like I needed help.
Right.
So it was really an internal ailment that I had to reach out for help with. And they would come and pick up my daughter for me to take some naps or have an afternoon or a morning off, and I would greet them looking like normal, and I just had to swallow my pride and be grateful that they were able to be there for me and give me that time. They would bring me meals, and I was up walking around like I could be making meals. So I had to not worry about what things looked like, and just be grateful that they were so loving, and it strengthened my relationships with them. And also, like, I decided early on that Valerie had the gift of loving people. Other people could love me too.
Oh,
and
well, you are easy.
Oh, thank you.
Easy to love. I appreciate what you're just teaching me right now, Becca, because a couple of things really struck me as important. That one thing that thematically was coming out of our time that we got to spend together with Becca is that sometimes we feel like it's really, really virtuous to be helpful and to be service oriented, which of course it is, but we actually also turn it to the virtuous person is always the helper.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't recognize that there's something very, very strong and very mature about somebody who has the capacity to have a need. And I'm no stranger to this struggle myself. And so I really, really get that, is that when somebody is vulnerable and says, I need something, that is, in my opinion, one of the greatest demonstrations of one's own strength and one's capacity to care for oneself, but also to have trust that others want to love us well. And I think that you noticed that you mentioned to me, I think over and over again in your conversations with your husband afterwards, is that he was ready and waiting to love you, but sometimes he just needed a little bit more feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with your church community, is it was a pleasure for them to serve you. And sometimes we get in our own ways so much, because it's almost like you said, if you had been laid up and, looked sick, then it would have been something different. But you had to just almost like sit in your own discomfort of what will people think.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, what people think is generally quite charitable. I just think that we make up in our mind stories about what we think people think based on our the worst case scenario.
Yeah. I found in my journal just an entry about this.
I love it.
So it was talking about, I was afraid I couldn't do everything on my own. I had to be humble and reach for help. I took the leap of faith and reached. By reaching, I learned about my Savior Jesus Christ and his love for me. I learned about the goodness of others and their pure hearts and willingness to serve. I learned that my family and even extended family loved me so much they do anything for me. My brother and cousins drove out to drop my brother off to spend a month with me. And then all of these things point back to my Savior and strengthen my relationship with him. So
awesome.
Just the goodness of others and their pure hearts and willingness to serve was something really beautiful to learn about.
Yeah, that when we're trying to be too strong and sort of self-sufficient, we're actually withholding others' capacity to love us and serve us, and which is always connecting us back to God.
Yeah.
And so, we don't want to ever, get in the way of that, of course, right? So you talked a little bit about, so I guess maybe I want to circle back and just say that so much of what Becca and I worked on together had to do with this brave, strong young woman learning about who she is.
Yes.
Right? And so many times our growth and development is a consequence of our struggle. And I think it began really, I'm sure it began before this, but the big thing that sort of moved her more rapidly into her own growth and development was her postpartum depression. But as you'll notice, we haven't talked about that for a while, because that was the thing that crossed Rebecca over from, in my opinion, sort of this, it moved her into a place of maturity where she became curious about learning about how she could become the woman that I think she knew, she had in her. And so it moved her into this development of as a young mother, as a wife, as an individual. And one of the other things that we really learned together was how she relates in relationship to others, family, friends, what was her internal working model around what relationship is supposed to look like, and who is she in relation to other people? Does she matter? How does she ask for help, or does she not? Or does she, all these different things were coming up. And one of the things that sort of was a product of that was a question that came up fairly in the later part of our therapy together. And do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
So I was struggling with my thoughts about my own worth. And as a lot of people do, my worth, what I thought it was based on my motherhood. I now had 2 children, a little boy, and just everything worked out with the pregnancy, by the way.
Yay!
But mostly my life revolved around relationships, my friendships with other students and their spouses, and also I'm a mother, I'm a sibling, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a friend to my husband, lover, everything. But in a sense, lost who I am. I didn't know who I was without those relationships. And what made me realize that was Valerie asked me the question. She shared an experience she had where in a group therapy meeting, they asked, "Who are you without any relationships?" And I thought, I have no idea.
Like, who are you with, so to kind of clarify, the question was, how do you describe yourself independent of who you are to somebody? And so that's like the golden question.
And it was a terrible question because I don't know who I am if I'm not a mother. I'm a teacher or a wife or a friend. And she said, think on it, journal about this, and come back and let me know. And I avoided it for a long time. I came back and I came with some cop-out answers like, I'm a nurturer. It's like, well, that's still the relationship. And it is true. I love to nurture people.
And those are good
animals.
things.
Yes.
Those are good things. I wasn't trying to say that
Right.
that's bad. Go ahead.
But then I don't know, life got busy, and I haven't had very many sessions with Valerie since then. We've taken a hiatus, but so here's her hearing for the first time too what I've finally.
Okay.
So this is me fulfilling my assignment.
I love it.
So I've realized that important parts of myself that are not with relationships are that I am a Christian. I believe in like Jesus Christ. I am a musician. I'm an explorer. I like to learn new things.
I love it.
And those are the main things that I've thought of that are part of my identity, that are important to me. Music, exploring, and my faith.
I love that. And you just shared with me a minute before we were taping that she's actually doing some things to develop those parts of herself. So why don't you say a little bit about that?
So faith is something constant. I'm continuing to study and learn. But I've also, with music, I've started teaching voice lessons. I was able to have really expand my voice studio, and I have 8 students now.
That's so cool.
Which is just enough for while I'm also juggling my 2 kids and the relationships. But we've had a recital. We're working toward another recital. I've really just embraced learning and growing through music lately. And also with exploring, I'm just being more aware of it and choosing to be happy with and make opportunities to explore, whether it's with reading or doing activities with my family or taking myself on solo dates where I try something new.
I love that. So this actually speaks to something that I think is, again, I think it's important throughout the lifespan, but my goodness, it's a theme that I feel just so strongly about, especially for these young women, these young mothers especially, and a lot of times especially with young mothers who have made the choice and are lucky enough to get to be at home with their children. And I want to make sure I'm not downplaying. I mean, and if anybody knows me, I am all about the fundamental importance, like the profound importance of relationship, and that we are defined by, and we only know ourselves in relationship. That is the mirror by which we learn who we are and how we interact and how we grow and develop is through relationship. And at the same time, there's something so important about us knowing who we are as individuals. And many times when I work with women, often young mothers, women who are completely devoted in every good way to the nurture and care of their children and their spouses, and especially in those years where their careers are being developed and things like that. A lot of times these women wonder why their struggling, why they're lonely, why they're sad. I mean, some of them are like, I'm doing what I always wanted to do. I want to have a family. I want to have children. And why do I feel so empty? And this is not an uncommon phenomenon, and it was one that I felt myself. And so from my own personal experience, and as I work with these young women, what I have come to find is that sort of the paradox is that the more we give ourselves the permission to cultivate our individual selves, the more happiness we have, and the more we love and enjoy and can pull all of the good things out of the relationships that we want the most. And so when a couple is struggling with even sexual intimacy, for example, I will, especially when the woman is struggling with issues of desire, one of the first things that I will recommend that she do, again, doesn't seem like it makes sense, but it actually works, is I will say, who are you? Who are you as a woman? What do you like to do? What are your interests? What are your, and 9 times out of 10, their answer is like a blank stare. It's like, I don't remember. I don't know. I can tell you how I spend my time. I can tell you what I do with my day. And it's generally good, nurturing things. And yet there's a part of them that has forgotten who they are. And so, we talk about joining a volleyball team or taking a painting class or going running or remembering that, Becca, in this case, she's an accomplished singer. And we sometimes lose ourselves in certain periods of our lives. And so one of the ways that we enrich ourselves and that there is more of us to find joy in relationship through is by learning who we are independent of those things. And so to be an explorer, to be a woman of faith who gives her life to cultivating interests around her relationship with God, to like actually spend time developing a talent, and I love this idea that with your voice lessons, you're doing it in a way that works for your life right now, because you really are busy with your young family and things are busy, but you've figured out a way to build it into your life so that there's a part of you that isn't mom, or isn't wife, but is Becca. Go ahead.
Well, this also played into my New Year's resolutions. I wanted to learn how to play basketball, and so that I can. Well, it's kind of a relationship thing. Also, my husband loves basketball. Yeah, and I don't hate it. I just am not. Really good at it.
I love it.
So
cool.
My New Year's resolutions were to learn how to play basketball, and to learn to sew. Just 2 things I've been wanting to do my whole life, but never given a chance.
I love that. Is to just never lose track of, it's like there's so much like raw material inside of us, talents that are just waiting to be cultivated. And when we develop these sort of unknown parts of ourselves, we find joy. And when we find joy, we bring this energy everywhere that we go. Yeah. And so if we take time for ourselves to do these things, it is the furthest thing from selfish. It's self-loving, but it's also a way to become more of ourselves that then we have to give, to share with all of the people that we have the privilege of doing life with. And so I think you're an inspiration, Becca, for trying to fit it in, because, reality is it's busy. You've got 2, an infant and a toddler and a busy husband and a busy life. I mean, your life is busy, but it's almost like too important not to do is kind of how I see it, because I also work with people that are 10 or 15 years older than you, who have sort of been kicking the can down the road for that many years, and they're paying the price for it. They're lost, and sometimes they're kind of bitter and angry and resentful, and yet don't really have a direction in which to point it. I mean, I think they do point it in certain directions, but it's not always exactly, in my opinion, like the blame of the directions where they pointed. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's as women, or as in different situations as men, we are agents, to make our lives what they can be by developing ourselves. So what would you say, was the most difficult part of the process for you?
So we kind of addressed this earlier, but choosing to trust you as a stranger was difficult. And I think also, since we talked about the potty training, sometimes you make some pretty real realizations, and to realize that I was letting my child be the instrument in which I saw my worth and my success as a mother and a person. And that I didn't want to put that on her. So just difficult realizations that you make, learning to trust somebody new.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's, the mark of somebody who is whose nervous system is well defined is that you don't just trust somebody that you don't know. And so for you to to spend some time learning about me and trying to make the discerning if I was trustworthy is actually a compliment to you. So I I have no problem with that.
They're also at first, counseling is something kind of an old hat for my side of my family. People have done counseling, it's talked about. And then in my spouse's side, it's becoming more talked about. But when I started counseling with Valerie, it still hadn't been talked about very much. And my husband was a little bit... he was a little bit nervous, so this was also challenging. Because he wasn't sure if he wanted me to choose somebody else to share my deep, important feelings with, other than him, because that's a role that he cherishes. And wanted to be the sole provider for those emotional needs that I have. And so talking with my husband, helping him know how valuable this would be for me and him. It was a challenge that we got to work on together.
I love that.
I made a commitment to share with him whatever I would share with Valerie. I told him that if he hasn't heard it before, he will after my session.
I love it. I love it.
But that was a commitment I made for him to feel comfortable with counseling, and he's excited for a less busy time of life where we can do counseling together. Because he's seen the fruits of the labor.
I remember that change. I remember his sort of ambivalence, by your report, and then you're coming back week after week, and what's so cool is very standard for the work that I do is as you have these transformative experiences, and I'm so lucky that I get to watch them like unfolding, and to say, go home and talk to your husband about this. Like, this is amazing. And the one thing, the only feedback that I get that makes me a little bit sad is half the time they're like, I can't really, it's hard to explain. Like, it's hard to secondhand, take them back into the moment. And so sometimes with couples, even when it's with individual work, I'm always open to it, permitting the schedules and things. But it's sometimes even nice to have individual sessions with the spouse just in the room listening, so that there's no need to sort of try to recreate the picture of what happened in these powerful moments that we share together. And I love that you guys navigated that ambivalence so well, that he saw that you had a need. And I think it's so normal. I love that he wanted to be that sort of sole provider. And yet I have come to discover, as I've worked with people and in my own work even, that sometimes the people that we love the most and that we're the closest to, it's hard to go to those places because they're almost too close to us. like the blind spots are sometimes better seen by somebody who has just enough distance that they can see things that somebody who is in who's doing life with us doesn't have the capacity to see, or their own fears and vulnerabilities and insecurities get a little bit in the way. And I think that's normal. And so for you to have these discoveries and these experiences, and then to bring them back and help, and then walk through those with him, is amazing. And I love that his openness to like trust the process, even though it was sort of a new territory for him, was pretty amazing. So, what would you say was we kind of already talked about sort of like the way it impacted you sort of as we went. What are your thoughts?
So, I've kind of thought about short-term impact was I had better health, just with relationships. Physically, I started choosing to exercise more.
Oh, that's right.
Based on the big 5.
Yeah.
And then another impact is that I have stronger and healthier relationships. And a big goal I had with therapy was I realized in my life, I think in hindsight, oh, that should have been fun. I should have enjoyed that. There was a trip to Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, that I should have enjoyed, but it was miserable at the time. Just because I was trying to people please the people we came with, the family that we met there, and joy in the journey is something that I've been through navigating these self-discoveries or how I feel about relationships. My ultimate goal has been been really to learn how to have joy in the moment.
I love that. What a great take home.
So here was the big test happened. We went camping with some friends in Missouri, and it was early September or late August, super humid and warm.
Mind you, she has a almost newborn
my baby was like 4 weeks old, and my little girl had just turned 2.
Wow.
It was crazy. There were spiders everywhere, and I hate spiders. Not to mention the crickets. As you walked on the road, there were hundreds of crickets jumping out of my way. And it's the first time. My husband loves camping. We've been camping a dozen times at least. But it's the first time I can remember camping with friends or anyone and enjoying the time while I was there.
Aww.
As we were packing, I had made the choice. I'm going to enjoy just being with my friends, being with my children, being with my husband. And we're going to enjoy each other's company. And I don't need to think about the other stresses I might have in my life. I can just enjoy the moment with my friends and family. And the spiders and the crickets caught me off guard. So did the sticky humidity. But it's the first camping trip I can remember enjoying while I was there. I enjoyed the time with my kids, with my husband.
Yeah, your capacity for heightened awareness.
Yeah.
That you were making a choice to be present and to find joy in that moment. And I think, that right there is there a greater gift of emotional health than the fact that we come to realize that we can grow and learn and come to a point where we can make choices about joy.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's awesome. Well, that's amazing.
And it's the impact has also helped me enjoy these long days with my children.
Yeah.
Where we're in our pajamas all day. I can just, instead of thinking, oh, I should have gotten dressed, or oh, I should make sure the dishes are done.
Yeah.
I can sit there on the floor with my kids and enjoy just being together for a little bit.
Like this chapter of your life is unique. And, every chapter of our lives come with their struggles, but also their joys.
Yeah.
And once again, it's presence, awareness, making choices to feel joy when before it felt overwhelming, and it can still actually be overwhelming and hard.
It is.
Yeah, there are bad days, and that's, I think, kind of this acceptance of what is, and then just breathing into it and letting it sort of be okay. Today's a day where we stay in our pajamas.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do. And not shaming yourself or shoulding yourself.
and just loving and enjoying the moment instead of years later thinking, I should have been happy there. I should have enjoyed that.
I think we all fall into that trap sometimes. So what would you say would be the impact that it has had on some of your most important relationships?
So one thing this has helped me do is, I don't know, this isn't the way I really want to word it, but it's helped me question the relationships or
get curious.
Yeah. And really address them. So with my husband, it's helped me really address things since we had made that commitment that I wanted to talk with him about everything I talked with Valerie about.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would say, look, this is what I want to talk to Valerie about, but I'm bringing it up with you first so that you can get your, you get dibs.
I love it.
And so sometimes it'd be conflict, and it really helped us just navigate some things that we haven't talked about that we didn't realize we needed to talk about.
Yeah.
It also helped me realize that it's okay to question my relationship with God. I, for the first time, I'm 27 years old.
Yeah.
So in my life, I really asked the question, where do I stand with God? What is my relationship with Him? Do I really believe He exists?
Yeah.
And it was kind of an abrasive moment.
Yeah.
And scary.
Totally scary.
But I finally gave myself permission to ask the question.
Yeah.
Which was really important to me, and now I'm so grateful for, because it was able to let me stand back and
yes.
And I'm hoping with other relationships, with family members, it's been, well, relationships with family members can be tricky.
Absolutely.
But I'm working on being myself and taking care of myself in those relationships, setting boundaries, or being honest with how I feel, sharing my feelings when they're there instead of holding them back and bottling them up.
Yes.
And that's been improving my communication with my siblings, my in-laws.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, Becca, because it feels like, just to circle back to the very beginning of our conversation, when you made the choice to let me in and to love me and to let me love you, it opened up your mind's capacity for curiosity, to ask questions, to become curious, to talk about and address things that were too scary for words and too scary to bring into a relational conversation that you had sort of shoved down because it felt overwhelming and too much. And so when we started working together and you started having the courage to walk into these dark places because you were no longer alone, and you discovered that not only were they manageable, but they could actually be brought to light, and they could be soothed and on some level healed, and that you could have a friendly relationship with some of your largest monsters, that it gave you this increasing capacity not only to look at your own darkness and your own fear and insecurities, but it actually expanded into your capacity to use that skill set outside of the room. That you did some scary and brave things in your marriage because you let your husband in maybe a little bit more than you had before. That it gave you the capacity and the courage to recognize that God was open to a deeper relationship too. And sometimes deeper relationships require one to take close and hard looks at how we feel and where we are, and not just sort of staying with the Sunday school answers, as it were. Yes. And so your increasing desire and capacity for deeper engagement, beginning, just in our relationship, took you all the way to relationships that are like the most important relationships of your life. That with your spouse, the way you differently engage with your children, the way you recognize that when I'm doing my own personal work, my children grow because I start questioning my own motives. I start getting curious about why I feel strongly about something that there's another that your wise true brain is acknowledging shouldn't be that big of a deal. All the way down to to every relationship in your life. So it's like a profound gift that kind of keeps on giving, I think, if we let these therapeutic relationships do their job, I guess. So and but I always say, it's not me. Like, you're doing all the work, the reflectioning, the journaling, the talking to husbands, the initiating hard conversations, the interacting with in-laws or, siblings in a different way, and managing the anxiety that comes with the growth, when maybe everybody isn't necessarily always like on the same wavelength with you, and like being okay, like being true to this new, this growing version of yourself, which is such hard and scary work. So I'm just amazed by you.
Oh, thank you.
So do you have any final thoughts or comments about maybe just to somebody who may be considering going on this journey? What would you say to them?
I would say take the journey, and maybe one step to begin is journaling. As you start to write down your honest feelings for yourself, then it might be easier to share them with somebody else.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that they're there and they're real and they're valid. But I would encourage anyone to start a counseling journey with somebody they trust or choose to trust.
Yeah.
And being open to learning and growing even as an adult.
Yeah, that's so true. But I think as children, they're just accustomed to learning and growing. But as adults, it gets scarier. We sort of stick with things that we know, and don't take those scary steps into the darkness as much as maybe we should. So just a final thought, Rebecca, thank you so much. It's such an honor that I get to be your friend, and I'm really grateful for this time and that you've been willing to share this with a larger audience so that they might understand the power of growth and change, because you've done it in your own journey. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, take care. All right, signing off.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Voices About Living with therapist Valerie Hamaker. If you found this podcast meaningful, please share it. You never know who might be searching for hope that personal and relational healing is possible.